I'm Amber Mitchell, 34, and I just became the first billionaire in my family. The Bloomberg reporter's questions still echo in my mind as I stare at my brother Jason across our parents' dining table. How did you build a $4 billion company that revolutionized healthcare tech? 7 years ago, in this exact spot, Jason had thrown his head back laughing when I quit my hospital job to start an internet business. Playing entrepreneur will bankrupt you, he'd sneered. Come back to reality before you lose everything. Now his face is ashen as our mother slides today's newspaper toward him. Before I tell you how I went from being the family disappointment to a billionaire CEO, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, and if you enjoy family redemption stories like mine, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my next video. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut, my family valued stability above all else. My parents, Eleanor and Robert Mitchell, were the epitome of traditional success. Dad worked his way up to senior management at an insurance firm, and Mom was a dedicated high school English teacher. They never took risks with their careers, their investments, or their reputation in our community. This approach to life was drilled into us from an early age. My brother Jason embraced their philosophy completely. 3 years older than me, he was studious, practical, and followed a meticulous life plan. He attended a prestigious university, graduated with honors, and immediately secured a management track position at Westfield Memorial Hospital. Every choice he made seemed calculated to impress our parents, and it worked. They beamed with pride when he became the youngest department head in the hospital's administrative division at just 29. I, on the other hand, was always the family misfit. While Jason excelled at math and business courses, I split my time between science and computer club. I built my first website at 13 and taught myself basic programming by 15. My parents viewed these interests as cute hobbies, but constantly steered me toward more practical pursuits. Computers are for boys, my mother once told me when I wanted to attend a summer coding camp instead of the nursing introduction program she'd found. Healthcare is a stable field for a woman. You'll always have job security. To please them, I eventually pursued nursing, graduating with a BSN and landing a position at the same hospital where Jason worked. While I enjoyed helping patients, the hospital's outdated systems frustrated me daily. Medication errors, scheduling problems, and communication breakdowns seemed entirely preventable with the right technology. The system works fine, Jason would say dismissively whenever I brought up potential improvements at family dinners. That's just how healthcare operates. Our family gatherings followed a predictable script. Jason would detail his latest promotion or achievement. My parents would shower him with praise, and then they'd politely ask about my work. When I'd mention ideas for improving patient care through technology, Jason would inevitably interrupt. Amber has these cute internet ideas, he'd say with a condescending smile, but healthcare is complex. You can't just slap an app on serious medicine. The only person who ever took my ideas seriously was my Aunt Sophia, my mother's younger sister. Unlike my mother, Aunt Sophia had started her own interior design business and understood entrepreneurial drive. They don't see it yet, she told me once, but you're seeing problems no one else is addressing. That's valuable. Jason's dismissive attitude wasn't limited to my career ideas. He competed with me in every aspect of life, from holiday gift-giving to home purchases. When I bought my modest condo, he purchased a luxurious townhouse the following month. When I received a departmental commendation at work, he made sure to mention his larger achievement at the next family dinner. Our dynamic was exhausting but familiar. Jason was the golden child who reinforced my parents' worldview, while I was the dreamer who needed to get serious. As the years passed, the distance between us grew, but I maintained the peace by keeping my more ambitious ideas to myself during family gatherings. What none of them realized was that my impractical background nursing experience, combined with self-taught technology skills, was giving me insights that pure administrators like Jason couldn't see. While they viewed healthcare from spreadsheets and budgets, I witnessed firsthand how poor systems affected real patients' lives. As Jason climbed the hospital hierarchy, eventually becoming assistant hospital administrator, his attitude toward me became increasingly patronizing. Not everyone can be management material, he told me at my parents' anniversary party, placing his hand on my shoulder. The world needs good nurses too, sis. Little did he know, I was already sketching the initial designs for what would eventually become PillSmart in my spare time. But the catalyst that would turn these sketches into action was still to come. The day that changed everything started like any other Tuesday shift on the geriatric floor. I was handling medication rounds when I entered room 415, where Eleanor Thompson, an 87-year-old grandmother of 6, was recovering from hip replacement surgery. As I checked her chart, I noticed something alarming. She had been given the wrong dosage of her blood pressure medication for 3 consecutive days. The error wasn't caught because of a shift change and poor handoff procedures. Mrs. Thompson was fortunately stable, but the incident could have been catastrophic. When I reported the error through proper channels, the response was bureaucratic and unsatisfying. "We'll update the protocol and review in next month's staff meeting." That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was how many Eleanor Thompsons there were in hospitals across the country. Vulnerable patients whose safety relied on overworked nurses, juggling paper charts, and disconnected digital systems. The problem wasn't bad nurses or doctors, it was bad systems. I spent the next 3 weeks researching medication errors. The statistics were staggering. Preventable medication errors impacted more than 7 million patients annually and cost the healthcare system billions. Yet most proposed solutions involved more paperwork, more checklists, more of the same approaches that were already failing. My idea was different. What if we created a smart system that tracked medications from prescription to administration, using machine learning to identify potential errors before they reached patients? What if we could integrate this with existing hospital systems, but make it intuitive enough that even the most technology-resistant staff could use it? I began sketching interfaces on my iPad during lunch breaks. I researched similar technologies and found fragmented solutions, but nothing comprehensive. The more I investigated, the more convinced I became that this wasn't just a good idea, it was a necessary one. The final push came when I approached Jason about implementing even a small pilot program at our hospital. We were having coffee in the cafeteria when I showed him my initial mock-ups. "This is what you've been wasting time on?" he asked, barely glancing at my work. "Amber, we have vendor relationships and procurement processes. We can't just implement some nurse's hobby project." "But if we could reduce medication errors by even 20%, the administration has bigger priorities," he interrupted. "Besides, if this was such a great idea, don't you think the big healthcare tech companies would have done it already?" That evening, I had dinner with my boyfriend Trevor, a pharmaceutical sales representative who I'd been dating for 2 years. I excitedly shared my refined concept, expecting support. "Babe," he said with a sigh, "do you know how many regulations there are in healthcare? How much capital you'd need? This isn't like making an Instagram app. You'd need millions in funding, a team of developers, clinical trials. I know it would be hard, but..." "Be realistic," Trevor continued. "You have a stable job with benefits. Why risk everything on some pipe dream? Nobody leaves nursing to start a tech company." 2 days later, I attended a healthcare innovation hackathon downtown. I wasn't planning to pitch my idea, just wanting to see what others were working on. But during the networking session, I found myself describing my concept to a programmer named Riley Chen, who had worked on electronic health record systems. "That's actually brilliant," Riley said, eyes widening. "The approach you're describing addresses problems I've seen across multiple hospital systems. Have you started building it?" For the first time, someone didn't just dismiss my idea, they understood it. Riley and I spent the entire evening whiteboarding possibilities, and by midnight we had the skeleton of a business plan. The next day, I made the decision. I would quit my nursing job and commit to building this company. I cashed out my modest $401k despite my financial advisor's warnings, downsized from my condo to a cheaper apartment, and calculated that I had about 8 months of runway before I'd be completely broke. When I called my parents to tell them I was leaving nursing to start a healthcare technology company, my mother's first question was, "Is this because Jason got promoted again?" "You don't need to compete with him, dear." The stage was set for the family dinner that would change everything. My palms were sweating as I parked outside my parents' colonial-style home for our monthly family dinner. I had specifically waited until today to announce my decision, wanting to do it in person. Inside, my mother was arranging her signature pot roast on the dining table while my father poured wine. Jason and his girlfriend Meredith had already arrived, discussing their recent vacation to Bermuda. "There she is," my father said as I entered. "We were just hearing about Jason's promotion to hospital operations director. Isn't that wonderful?" "Congratulations," I said automatically, hanging my coat in the hallway closet. Throughout the appetizer course, Jason dominated the conversation with details about his new responsibilities and salary increase. My mother nodded enthusiastically, while my father asked detailed questions about his new office and parking space. I pushed my stuffed mushrooms around my plate, rehearsing my announcement in my head. As my mother cleared the appetizer plates, I took a deep breath. "I have some news too. Did you finally get that charge nurse position?" Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. "Actually, I've given notice at the hospital," I said. "I'm starting my own company." The clatter of my mother dropping a serving spoon broke the sudden silence. "Your own company?" my father repeated slowly. "What kind of company?" "A healthcare technology company," I explained, gaining confidence as I described the medication management system I'd been developing. "It will help reduce medication errors and improve patient outcomes. Riley, she's a programmer I met, is coming on as my technical co-founder. We're going to revolutionize how medications are tracked and administered." I expected questions, concerns even, but not what happened next. Jason threw his head back and laughed. Not a chuckle, but a full-throated laugh that made Meredith look uncomfortable. "Playing entrepreneur will bankrupt you," he said when he finally composed himself. "An internet business? Seriously, Amber? What do you know about running a company?" "I know the problems that need solving," I countered. "I've seen them firsthand." "Do you have any idea how regulated healthcare technology is?" Jason continued. "The compliance requirements alone would take years to navigate, not to mention the capital you'd need." "I've been researching." "Research is an experience," he interrupted. "You're a nurse, not a business person, not a programmer, not an entrepreneur." My mother returned from the kitchen, concern etched on her face. "Honey, is this because of what happened with that patient last month?" "Because if you're burned out, there are other nursing positions." "I'm not burned out," I said firmly. "I see an opportunity to make a difference at a larger scale." "By bankrupting yourself?" Jason interjected. "The failure rate for startups is what, 90%? And those are founded by people with actual business backgrounds." My father cleared his throat. "Amber, we're just worried about your security, your benefits, your retirement plan." "I've thought this through," I insisted. "I've saved enough for 8 months of expenses. Riley and I have a prototype that's already generating interest." "Interest doesn't pay bills," Jason said dismissively. "Look, I get it. You want to do something different. But this isn't the way. Come back to reality before you lose everything." The dinner deteriorated from there. Every point I made was countered by Jason with increasing condescension. My parents exchanged worried glances but offered no support. By dessert, the conversation had moved on to my cousin's wedding plans, my announcement effectively dismissed. As I helped clear the dishes, my mother whispered, "Maybe you should talk to Jason privately about opportunities at the hospital. He could help you find something with more responsibility if that's what you're looking for." I left that night with tears threatening to spill but refused to let them fall until I was safely in my car. The drive home was a blur of disappointment and anger, but also determination. Their reaction had only reinforced what I already knew. No one was going to believe in this vision until I proved it worked. The following weeks brought daily phone calls from my worried mother, forwarded job listings from my father, and the occasional helpful email from Jason with articles about failed startups or nursing leadership positions. I stopped answering most of their calls, focusing instead on building what would eventually become PillSmart. The final straw came at Thanksgiving, when Jason cornered me by the drinks table. "I heard you actually went through with it," he said, swirling his scotch. "Mom's worried sick about you." "I'm fine," I replied tightly. "We've made significant progress on our prototype." "Amber," he said, lowering his voice to a patronizing whisper, "it's not too late to come back. I can probably get you your old position if you admit this was a mistake." I set down my glass carefully. The only mistake was thinking my family would support me. After that, I made a conscious decision to stop sharing business updates with them. If, when I succeeded, they would find out with everyone else. Our first office wasn't much of an office at all. Riley and I rented a tiny space in a deteriorating industrial building on the outskirts of town. The bathroom was down the hall, shared with 3 other small businesses, and the heating worked sporadically at best. But the rent was cheap, and we needed to conserve every dollar. Our team consisted of just 3 people. Riley as CTO handling all technical development, me as CEO managing product design and business development, and Diana, a former hospital administrator who believed in our vision enough to take a massive pay cut to join as our operations lead. The first investor pitch was a disaster. We met with a healthcare-focused venture capital firm recommended by one of Riley's contacts. I had rehearsed our presentation for days, perfecting every slide and practicing answers to potential questions. "Your background is interesting," the lead investor said after our pitch, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "A nurse and a programmer with no prior startups between you, trying to disrupt healthcare administration? We have intimate knowledge of the problems I began." "Everyone knows healthcare has problems," he interrupted. "What we don't see is why you're qualified to solve them or how you'll navigate the regulatory landscape. Come back when you have some traction or an experienced CEO." We left with nothing but wounded pride and a list of objections to overcome. That night, I added another $5,000 from my personal credit card to keep us afloat for another month. The technical challenges proved even more daunting than the financial ones. Our first prototype was clunky and slow. Hospital IT systems were notoriously difficult to integrate with, and we spent weeks just figuring out how to parse data from different electronic health record platforms. During those early months, there were no weekends, no holidays, and precious little sleep. I lived on instant noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days with no guarantee of success. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep, the few friends I had stopped calling after I missed enough gatherings. Our first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Neil Patel, a physician from my old hospital who had witnessed similar medication errors, agreed to let us pilot our system at his small private practice. The implementation was far from perfect. We spent nights and weekends troubleshooting bugs and redesigning interfaces based on staff feedback, but after 3 months the results were undeniable. Medication errors had decreased by 43%, and staff reported saving an average of 52 minutes per shift on medication reconciliation tasks. Dr. Patel was impressed enough to introduce us to colleagues at other practices. He also became our first angel investor, writing a check for $150,000 that allowed us to hire 2 more developers and move to a slightly less dismal office. We named our core technology PillSmart and refined it based on each new implementation. The system used machine learning to identify potential drug interactions and barcode scanning to ensure the right medication reached the right patient. Most importantly, we designed it to be intuitive for busy healthcare workers who had little time for training on new technology. As word spread among independent practitioners, we secured enough small contracts to demonstrate a viable business model. Riley led the development of our second-generation system, which added predictive analytics to identify patients at highest risk for medication errors. Our team grew to 12 people, each taking reduced salaries in exchange for equity. We moved to a legitimate office, still not fancy, but with reliable heat and our own bathroom. I was no longer maxing out credit cards to make payroll, but we were far from comfortable. Through it all, the memory of Jason's laughter at that family dinner kept me going on the hardest days. When a critical server crashed at 2 a.m., when a prospective client chose a competitor's product, when my car broke down and I couldn't afford to fix it, I remembered his dismissal and pushed harder. I wonder if you've ever had someone laugh at your dreams? Type in there in the comments if you've had a family member doubt you, just like Jason doubted me. When those moments hit, finding motivation and proving them wrong is powerful, but what came next in our journey taught me something even more important about success. Let me continue with what happened after we finally started gaining traction. As PillSmart began to find its footing, my relationship with my family deteriorated in inverse proportion. The more progress we made professionally, the more strained our personal interactions became. At Christmas dinner that year, Jason dominated the conversation with news of his promotion to hospital chief operating officer. When my mother finally turned to me and asked about my little project, I shared that we had implemented our system in 7 private practices and were in talks with a small regional hospital. "That's nice, dear," she said, clearly not understanding the significance. But is it actually making money yet? Your father and I worry about your retirement planning. Before I could answer, Jason interjected. These tech startups burn through cash for years. They call it growth phase to disguise that they're basically failing upward until they collapse or get acquired. He turned to me with a patronizing smile. No offense, Amber. I stopped sharing updates after that. When my parents called, I kept conversations brief and deflected questions about work. I missed my cousin's wedding because it coincided with our pitch to a critical investor. I skipped Easter brunch to prepare for a product demonstration. Each absence widened the gap between us. Jason's wedding to Meredith, the daughter of the hospital board chairman, was a lavish affair at the Westfield Country Club. I attended alone, having not seen my family in nearly 3 months. No date? My mother asked as I took my seat at the family table. You know, Dr. Reynolds' son is single again. He's a pediatrician now. I'm too busy for dating, Mom, I replied, not mentioning that Trevor had ended our relationship 6 months earlier, telling me I had changed and become obsessed with my company. During the reception, a distant uncle cornered me by the bar. Jason tells me you left nursing to play with computers, he said, his tone making clear what he thought of that decision. I started a healthcare technology company, I corrected him. Well, not everyone can be a success like Jason, he replied, patting my shoulder sympathetically before wandering off. I left the wedding early, making an excuse about work. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did have emails to answer and a presentation to prepare, but mostly, I couldn't bear another conversation where I was viewed as the family failure chasing an impractical dream. That night, Aunt Sophia called. Unlike the rest of the family, she followed our company's progress and understood what we were building. I saw you leave early, she said. Don't let them get to you, Amber. What you're doing is important. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, I admitted. The company is growing, but I've lost my family in the process. You haven't lost them, she replied. They just don't understand yet. Success speaks in a language everyone comprehends. Keep going. Those words became my mantra during the darkest periods. When imposter syndrome struck at 3 a.m., when competitors with deeper pockets threatened our existence, when regulatory hurdles seemed insurmountable, I remembered. Success speaks in a language everyone comprehends. Meanwhile, Jason's star continued to rise. His marriage to Meredith accelerated his career trajectory, and he was featured in a regional business journal as a healthcare administrator to watch. My mother mailed me the clipping with a note. Thought you'd want to see this? Maybe Jason could give you some business advice? I sent them a link to our feature in a healthcare technology blog, but never received a response. The silence hurt more than any criticism. The family divide reached its peak at Thanksgiving the following year. Jason arrived last, making a grand entrance with Meredith, who immediately announced they were expecting their first child. The evening revolved entirely around their news, with my mother already discussing nursery themes and my father beaming with pride at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. When I mentioned securing our first hospital-wide contract, my news was acknowledged with polite nods before the conversation immediately returned to baby names and due dates. I excused myself early and cried the entire drive home, feeling more alone than ever despite our company's growing success. The validation I'd hoped would come from my family seemed further away than ever, even as external validation began pouring in from clients and industry experts. That night, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of both my company and my family relationships. I would stop seeking their approval entirely. My energy would go exclusively toward building PillSmart into the company I knew it could become. If my family couldn't see my value, I would find my worth elsewhere. 18 months after that painful Thanksgiving dinner, PillSmart stood at a crucial crossroads. We had successfully implemented our system in dozens of private practices and 3 small hospitals, but we needed a major client to reach the next level. Northeast Healthcare Network, a system comprising 12 hospitals across 3 states, issued an RFP for a new medication management platform. With over 4,000 beds and 15,000 staff members, they represented the enterprise-level client we desperately needed to prove our scalability. Our team of 45 worked around the clock preparing our proposal. Riley enhanced our AI capabilities to generate predictive insights about potential medication errors based on staffing levels and patient demographics. Diana overhauled our implementation strategy to address the complex needs of a multi-hospital system. When the day of our final presentation arrived, I stood before Northeast Selection Committee, 8 stern-faced executives with skeptical expressions feeling the weight of our company's future on my shoulders. "Your system looks impressive on paper," the chief medical officer said after our demonstration, "but your company has never managed an implementation of this scale. Why should we take that risk?" It was the question I'd anticipated and feared most. Taking a deep breath, I abandoned my prepared response and spoke from experience. "Because unlike our competitors, we've lived the problems we're solving," I explained. "I've personally witnessed medication errors harm patients because of flawed systems. Our team includes nurses, pharmacists, and administrators who've worked on the front lines. We built PillSmart to address the real challenges healthcare workers face every day, not just to check boxes on a feature list." I shared the story of Eleanor Thompson, the patient whose wrong medication dosage had sparked my initial idea. "This isn't just business for us, it's personal." The room was silent when I finished. Then the chief nursing officer leaned forward. "I started as a floor nurse," she said quietly. "I've seen those same errors. Your approach is different from anything we've reviewed." 2 weeks later, we received the call. Northeast Healthcare had selected PillSmart for a $2.8 million initial contract. The celebration in our office lasted well into the night, with champagne flowing and tears of joy and relief. We had finally broken through to the enterprise level. The Northeast implementation became our proving ground. The first 3 months were grueling, with inevitable technical challenges and resistance from some staff. But by the 6-month mark, the data told an undeniable story. Medication errors across their hospitals had decreased by 47%, saving an estimated $9.2 million in potential litigation and extended patient stays. Northeast's chief financial officer became our most enthusiastic advocate, introducing us to other hospital networks and speaking at healthcare conferences about the ROI of our system. Our sales pipeline filled with qualified leads from major healthcare providers nationwide. This success attracted attention from the venture capital firms that had previously rejected us. Artemis Ventures, a prestigious healthcare-focused fund, led our Series A round of $18 million, valuing the company at $75 million. For the first time, we had a significant war chest to accelerate growth. We moved into real offices in a downtown high-rise, with glass-walled conference rooms, a proper kitchen, and enough space for our rapidly growing team. I finally took a salary that reflected my role as CEO, though still well below market rate, preferring to reinvest in the company. As we expanded, I hired experienced executives to strengthen our leadership team, including a seasoned CFO and a chief commercial officer with extensive healthcare sales experience. Our team grew to 45 employees, then 70, with engineers, sales representatives, and implementation specialists joining weekly. The Regional Business Journal published a profile titled "Healthcare Disruptor: How PillSmart is Revolutionizing Medication Safety." The article detailed our growth trajectory and innovative approach to a long-standing healthcare challenge. I sent the article to my family with a brief note. "Thought you might be interested in this." My mother replied with, "Very nice, dear. Will you be home for Christmas?" My father didn't respond at all. Jason sent a text message. "Cute write-up. Hope it lasts." Their dismissal should have hurt, but I was too busy building something important to dwell on it. My world had expanded beyond my family's narrow definition of success. During an industry conference in San Francisco, I met Natalie Wong, a partner at Blue Ridge Capital, who had built and sold her own healthcare technology company. She approached me after my panel presentation, impressed by both our technology and growth metrics. "You've created something special here," she said over coffee the next day, "but you're hitting the inflection point where many founder-led companies stumble. The skills that got you here aren't necessarily the ones that will get you to the next level." Instead of being offended, I recognized the wisdom in her observation. "I know," I admitted. "I'm learning as fast as I can, but sometimes it feels like I'm barely staying ahead of the company's needs." Natalie became an informal mentor, offering guidance on everything from board management to international expansion strategy. Her experience proved invaluable as we developed our second-generation platform, incorporating advanced AI capabilities that could predict potential medication errors before they occurred. Our momentum continued to build. We secured our first international client, a Canadian hospital network, and began the complex process of navigating foreign regulatory requirements. Industry publications increasingly mentioned PillSmart as the emerging standard for medication management. Through it all, a part of me still wished my family could understand and appreciate what we were building. But their continued indifference had an unexpected benefit. It forced me to find validation in metrics that truly mattered: patient outcomes, customer satisfaction, and company culture rather than in familial approval. By the end of that year, PillSmart had implementations in over 200 healthcare facilities, from small practices to major hospital systems. We were profitable for the first time, with annual recurring revenue exceeding $24 million. This growth attracted attention from larger players in the healthcare technology space. MedTech Solutions, a publicly traded company, approached us with an acquisition offer that valued PillSmart at $350 million. The offer was tempting. It would make me and our early team members wealthy beyond our dreams. It would validate all the sacrifices and sleepless nights. It would show my family, especially Jason, that my internet business had been worth pursuing. But something didn't feel right. We were just beginning to realize our potential, just starting to make a real difference in patient safety across the healthcare system. Selling now felt like abandoning our mission halfway through the journey. After consulting with our board and leadership team, I declined the offer. "We're not done yet," I told our disappointed suitor. "There's too much important work ahead of us." That decision would prove to be the best one I ever made. I know many of you watching are also building something meaningful right now. Whether it's a business, a career change, or a personal transformation, there's always that moment where you have to decide, take the safe path, or keep pushing towards something bigger. Drop a keep going in the comments if you've faced that decision point and chose to continue despite obstacles. Now, let me tell you what happened when we decided to double down on our vision. The decision to decline MedTech's acquisition offer marked a turning point. Rather than resting on our early success, we accelerated our growth strategy, focusing on international expansion and enhanced AI capabilities. Blue Ridge Capital led our Series B funding round, investing $75 million at a valuation of $500 million. 6 months later, as our customer base expanded exponentially, Sequoia Partners led our Series C round of $120 million, valuing PillSmart at $1.2 billion. I had built a unicorn company, though I was too busy to celebrate this milestone. Our technology had evolved far beyond medication tracking. The third-generation PillSmart platform used artificial intelligence to analyze hospital workflows, predict staffing needs, and identify potential patient safety issues before they occurred. We expanded from medication management into comprehensive clinical operations support, becoming an essential system for hundreds of hospitals worldwide. Our team had grown to over 300 employees across offices in Boston, London, and Singapore. We had implemented PillSmart in more than 2,000 healthcare facilities across 12 countries. Most importantly, our technology had prevented an estimated 1.7 million medication errors, potentially saving thousands of lives. I was in a board meeting when my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Bloomberg wanted to feature PillSmart in a special report on healthcare innovation. They were particularly interested in my journey from hospital nurse to CEO of a billion-dollar company. The interview process was unlike anything I'd experienced before. A team of journalists spent weeks researching our company, interviewing our clients, and examining our technology. The photo shoot at our headquarters felt surreal: professional lighting, multiple outfit changes, and a makeup artist fussing over my appearance between shots. The reporters' questions were probing but fair. How did you identify this opportunity when established healthcare companies missed it? What obstacles did you face as a female founder in healthcare technology? How does it feel to disrupt an industry you once worked in? I answered honestly, sharing both the professional challenges and personal sacrifices. When asked about my family's reaction to my success, I paused before giving a diplomatic response about different perspectives on risk and reward. 2 weeks before the story was scheduled to run, we closed our final funding round. Tiger Global invested $250 million at a $4 billion valuation, making me a billionaire on paper as the company's largest individual shareholder. The morning the Bloomberg feature was published, I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. The digital cover showed me standing in our headquarters with the headline, "The Nurse Who Built a $4 Billion Healthcare Revolution: How Amber Mitchell's PillSmart is Transforming Patient Safety." The article detailed our company's growth trajectory, the lives saved by our technology, and my unconventional path from bedside nurse to tech CEO. It was thoughtful, accurate, and overwhelmingly positive. By mid-morning, my social media accounts had gained thousands of followers, and my email inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages. Former colleagues from the hospital reached out, many expressing amazement at what I'd built. Old classmates suddenly remembered our friendship. Investors who had rejected our early pitches sent congratulatory notes that transparently angled for involvement in our next round. The industry recognition was gratifying, but as the day progressed, I kept checking my phone for messages from one specific group, my family. By evening, there was still nothing, no call from my parents, no text from Jason, not even an email. I purchased a physical copy of Bloomberg Businessweek from a newsstand near our office. Seeing my face on the cover of a major business magazine was surreal. 7 years earlier, I had been a hospital nurse with an idea. Now, I was being hailed as a healthcare innovator and billionaire entrepreneur. As I stared at the magazine, I made a decision. Instead of waiting for my family to acknowledge my success, I would bring the evidence directly to them. I called my mother and asked if I could stop by for dinner the following evening. She sounded surprised but pleased, mentioning that Jason and Meredith would be there with their 2-year-old son. The next day, I drove to my parents' home with the Bloomberg issue tucked in my bag, not sure exactly what I hoped would happen, but knowing it was time for a reckoning. The familiar scent of my mother's beef bourguignon greeted me as I entered my childhood home. Some things never changed: the same furniture, the same family photos on the wall, several featuring Jason's graduation and wedding, one small one of me in my nursing cap, the same expectations. "Amber!" My mother embraced me. "It's been too long. You look different. Did you change your hair?" "New clothes, Mom, and probably less exhaustion showing on my face." My father gave me an awkward hug. "Good to see you, kiddo. Work keeping you busy?" "You could say that," I replied, resisting the urge to immediately pull out the magazine. Jason was already seated at the dining table, his son on his lap and Meredith beside him. "The prodigal daughter returns," he said with a smirk. "To what do we owe the honor?" "Just missed everyone," I said, taking my usual seat always to Jason's right, never at the head of the table. Dinner began with the usual pattern. Jason dominating conversation with stories about his work at the hospital, my parents hanging on every word, me picking at my food. He was describing a new efficiency initiative he'd implemented when I finally interrupted. "Actually, I have some news too." "You're finally dating someone?" my mother asked hopefully. "No," I said, reaching into my bag. I placed the Bloomberg magazine on the table, my face staring up at them from the glossy cover. My mother gasped. My father's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Jason's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as he read the headline, $4 billion? My father finally managed, his voice barely audible. "The valuation after our last funding round," I confirmed. "We're in over 2,000 hospitals now. Our technology has prevented nearly 2 million medication errors." "But how?" my mother asked, looking genuinely bewildered. "I thought you were just making some sort of app." "I've been trying to tell you for years, Mom. We built an entire healthcare technology platform. It started with medication management, but expanded into comprehensive clinical operations support." My father picked up the magazine, examining it as if testing its authenticity. "Bloomberg," he murmured. That's significant." Jason hadn't spoken. His face had drained of color as he stared at the magazine. Meredith looked from him to me with wide eyes. "Your brother always said you were smart," my mother offered weakly. I couldn't help but laugh. Did he? Because I remember him saying my internet business would bankrupt me, that I should come back to reality before I lose everything. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat. "Well, We were all just concerned about your security, Amber. Startups are risky. They are, I agreed. And support from family can make that risk a little less scary. But I never had that, did I? That's not fair, my mother protested. We just didn't understand what you were doing. You never tried to understand, I corrected her. You dismissed it because it didn't fit your definition of success. Because Jason said it wouldn't work. Jason finally spoke. You've made your point, Amber. Congratulations, you proved us all wrong. There was something in his tone, not quite resentment, not quite admiration, that made me realize a public victory lap wasn't what I needed. I excused myself and stepped onto the back porch for some air. A few minutes later, the door opened behind me. It was Jason, carrying 2 glasses of scotch. Peace offering, he said, handing me one. I figured this conversation was overdue. We stood in silence for a moment, looking at the same backyard where we'd played as children. Why did you always dismiss me? I finally asked. Even before the company, every idea, every achievement, you always had to minimize it. Jason took a long sip before answering. Because you've always seen things I couldn't see. Even when we were kids. You'd look at a problem and immediately spot a solution no one else considered. Do you know how threatening that is when you're supposed to be the successful older brother? So you put me down to build yourself up? I didn't think of it that way at the time, he admitted. But looking back? Yeah, probably. Another silence fell between us. You know what's ironic? Jason finally said. Westfield Memorial just paid millions to implement PillSmart last quarter. Everyone's raving about how intuitive it is, how it's drastically reducing errors. I'm the one who has to oversee the implementation of my little sister's technology that I said would never work. I couldn't help but smile. Is it good? Honestly? It's brilliant, he said quietly, and I hate that I couldn't see that 7 years ago. That conversation wasn't a perfect resolution. Years of dismissal and hurt couldn't be erased in one evening. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of misunderstanding between us. When we returned inside, my parents were still examining the magazine. My mother looked up with tears in her eyes. We're so proud of you, Amber, she said. We should have supported your dream. Yes, you should have, I agreed, but it's not too late to start. As I drove home that night, I realized that the validation I'd sought from my family felt different than expected. It didn't heal all wounds or erase the lonely years of building without their support. But it did offer something I hadn't anticipated. The opportunity for a new kind of relationship, one based on who we had become rather than who we had been. In the months following the Bloomberg feature and family confrontation, both my company and family relationships entered new phases of development. PillSmart continued its explosive growth. We opened offices in Tokyo and Berlin, expanding our global footprint. Our technology evolved to incorporate more advanced predictive analytics, becoming an essential tool for healthcare systems worldwide. Industry analysts began mentioning us alongside established healthcare technology giants, no longer as an upstart but as a leading innovator. But the most significant changes happened on a personal level. The day after our family dinner, I met with Riley at headquarters to catch up on product development. As we reviewed quarterly metrics, I found myself sharing details of the previous night's conversation. I expected to feel vindicated, I admitted. But it was more complicated than that. Riley nodded thoughtfully. Success doesn't heal the wounds of not being believed. It just changes the conversation. That insight stayed with me as I navigated my evolving family dynamics. The following weekend, I had lunch with Aunt Sophia, who had been my lone supporter from the beginning. I always knew you'd prove them wrong, she said, raising a glass of champagne. Though $4 billion exceeds even my expectations. I couldn't have done it without you believing in me, I told her. Those calls, when everyone else thought I was crazy, kept me going. Her support had inspired me to create the Mitchell Foundation for Women in Healthcare Technology, providing mentorship and seed funding to female founders working to solve healthcare challenges. Our first cohort included a brilliant nurse developing AI diagnostics for rural communities and a pharmacist creating a system to reduce waste in pharmaceutical supply chains. As for Jason, our relationship underwent a careful reconstruction. He called one evening to ask if I would speak at a hospital administration conference about healthcare innovation. Wouldn't that be awkward for you? I asked. Having your little sister as the keynote speaker? It would be more awkward trying to explain why the most successful healthcare tech founder in the state isn't speaking just because she's my sister, he replied. Small steps led to larger ones. My parents attended PillSmart's holiday party, witnessing firsthand the company I'd built and the respect my team had for me. My father, touring our product development floor, seemed genuinely amazed by the technology we'd created. I never understood what you were building, he admitted. I wish I'd asked better questions instead of just worrying. My mother, in her own way, tried to make amends by framing the Bloomberg cover in our family home, placing it prominently among the photos of Jason's achievements. In my personal life, unexpected developments brought additional perspective. I met Alex Chen, an architect specializing in healthcare facilities, at a hospital design conference where I was speaking. Unlike Trevor years before, Alex understood the demands of building something important and supported my unpredictable schedule and intense focus. My grandfather was a hospital administrator in Taiwan, he told me on our third date. He always said the physical building was just the shell, it was the systems inside that saved lives. What you've built would have amazed him. For the first time in years, I found myself making space for a relationship alongside my company, recognizing that success included personal connections as well as professional achievements. The most poignant moment came when Jason's son, my nephew Michael, visited our offices for Take Your Child to Work Day. As I showed him around, explaining in simple terms how our technology helped make patients safer, Jason watched with a complex expression. He talks about his Aunt Amber all the time, Jason said later. He tells his friends his aunt is a billionaire superhero who saves people with computers. I laughed. That's quite the exaggeration. Is it, though? Jason asked. You've saved more lives with PillSmart than I ever will as a hospital administrator. That conversation inspired our next initiative, funding a healthcare technology center at the local university, including a scholarship program named after our grandmother, who had been a nurse for 40 years. Jason joined the advisory board, contributing his administrative expertise to complement our technical knowledge. As I reflect on this journey, I've realized that proving people wrong isn't nearly as satisfying as I'd imagined during those difficult early years. The vindication I'd craved from my family felt hollow when it finally came too late to ease the lonely struggles, too circumstantial to heal the deeper hurt of not being believed. The true value wasn't in making Jason acknowledge he was wrong, but in creating something meaningful regardless of his opinion. PillSmart would have been important even if my family never recognized its worth. The patients whose lives were improved or saved by our technology didn't care about my family dynamics. They benefited from a solution that existed because I refused to abandon my vision. At our most recent family dinner, still at my parents' house, still with my mother's cooking, the dynamic had shifted in subtle but significant ways. We discussed PillSmart's latest innovations alongside Michael's school achievements and my parents' retirement plans. Not as competitors or critics, but as family members with different paths, different strengths, and a shared history. The scars remain. I still notice when Jason receives automatic deference in family discussions. I still feel a flicker of the old hurt when my mother casually mentions how surprisingly well my company is doing. But these moments no longer define our relationship or my sense of self-worth. Success didn't heal old wounds, it simply created space for new possibilities. The family that couldn't believe in my vision before it existed must now reckon with its undeniable reality. And I, the daughter and sister who once desperately sought their approval, must decide what kind of relationship I want with the family who failed to support my dreams but now witnesses their fruition. It's a work in progress, much like PillSmart itself, constantly evolving, sometimes faltering, but ultimately moving towards something better than what came before. Has family ever doubted your dreams or passions? I'd love to hear your stories of proving them wrong or finding your own path despite their skepticism. Share in the comments below. And if this story of family redemption and entrepreneurial perseverance resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Remember, sometimes the greatest motivation comes from those who don't believe in you. Let their doubt fuel your determination. Thank you all for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you in the comments.